Today, South Korea and Canada celebrate 6 years of diplomatic ties. To mark the occasion, President Yoon Suk Yeol and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be sitting down for talks, this time here in Seoul. For more, let's turn to Dr. Scott Harrison from the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks for joining us. Now, President Yoon Suk Yeol visited Canada last September on his first official trip abroad after he was elected in May. Back then, the main agenda was trade. Do you think trade will top their summit agenda this time as well?
So trade is always a main point in summits and missions, so that's not so much of a surprise, and there's lots to build on and discuss, especially since the two countries do have a free trade agreement, and that South Korea is Canada's 7th largest trading partner. But despite the importance of trade, it wasn't the only item discussed at that September summit. So the two leaders, so Yoon and Trudeau, also agreed to enhance the bilateral relationship by building a comprehensive strategic partnership focused on 5 shared priorities. And they were quite wide-ranging, but they focus on human rights, security and defense, cooperation on supply chains and critical minerals, things around climate change and environment, as well as deepening partnerships in health and culture. So I think during the summit in Seoul, we'll see a continuation of this broadening of the relationship to include everything from both central and subnational governments, businesses, and people-to-people ties. And as was already mentioned in the show here, the stars are really aligning for a closer and more robust relationship between the two countries this year, because 2023 marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations. So I think both leaders will be looking to build on the symbolic anniversary and set the stage for the next 60-year cycle under this tagline of Stronger Together.
Right. And actually, the Trudeau's office said priorities at the Yoon-Trudeau meeting will include collaborating with actually G7 partners to support Ukraine, like you said, global issues, as well as advancing their transition to cleaner economies. Now, the question is, what kind of cooperative moves then can we expect from the two sides?
So after the summit, both Trudeau and Yoon will go to Hiroshima to participate in the G7 summit. And Japan, as this year's host of the G7, has placed Ukraine and climate change high up on the list of agenda items. So it makes sense for the two leaders to be wanting to discuss this in advance of the G7. For Ukraine is incredibly important for Canada. There's over 1 million people in Canada that have roots back to Ukraine. And so Trudeau could be advocating for more support around refugees, information sharing agreements, as well as security. On the climate change front, the current Canadian government does have a strong focus on net zero emission economies, as well as green economy transition. So these kind of shifts require changes in mindset, and they're also deeply dependent on new technology and international partnerships. And there's a very strong connection to South Korean expertise in this area. So I can imagine the two sides will want to do what they can to help further open the doors and set the stage for closer collaboration between experts and businesses to work on areas such as critical minerals, developing cleaner sources of energy, or decreasing carbon footprints in existing energy production.
Right, a wide range of concerns and interests that the two countries share at this moment. And the Canadian PM is expected to promote the Indo-Pacific strategy that his country unveiled last fall. Now, Dr. Harrison, walk us through that strategy, and how can that strategy be meaningful or significant to us, South Korea?
So Canada released its Indo-Pacific strategy in late November 2022 here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I think it's incredibly relevant and significant for South Korea. Canada's strategy focuses on security, trade, supply chain management, people-to-people exchanges, climate change mitigation, as well as diplomacy. It also has the goal of proving to the region and to Canadians in general that Canada is an active and engaged partner in the Asia-Pacific or the Indo-Pacific. So it's incredibly rare that a Canadian government to release an international strategy of any kind, let alone one focused on a specific region of the world. So this really highlights the seriousness of the matter for the government, as well as Canadians in general. So Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy comes with an initial 5-year budget. So the Trudeau government is under a little bit of pressure to show real concrete outcomes and initiatives. And I think this is starting here in South Korea. And this in the Indo-Pacific strategy does specifically mention South Korea as a critical partner in areas such as growing trade, extending Operation Neon, which monitors UN sanctions on North Korea, as well as working together on security cooperation and things like critical minerals, hydrogen, and clean energy.
Right.
And quite notably, it also mentions people-to-people ties, so we can see more in this area as well.
Right. Let's see how that strategy can unfold into so many opportunities for South Korea as well. Now, before we let you go, Dr. Harrison, there's a speculation that Trudeau may propose forming a new Quad alongside Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Now, what kind of Quad could that be?
So I think here Trudeau may be looking to build off the recent renewal of shuttle diplomacy between Seoul and Tokyo to advance what he proposed in January for a new Quad-like arrangement. But the difference here is Canada is not a part of the original quadrilateral security dialogue, so it could be looking for new ways of engaging in minilateral groupings on its own terms and highlighting the North Pacific component of its Indo-Pacific strategy. It sounds like the initial pitch to Japan was predominantly talking about regional peace and security network of some kind. But I think South Korea has been quite explicit in its need and want to balance its relations with its neighbors. So there could be a chance that Yoon might be hesitant to openly discuss or entertain such an idea if it could be perceived as an effort to counter China on any front. So I think if Trudeau and Yoon were to discuss the creation of a new Quad-like grouping, they'll need to keep it about more than just security.
Right. The summit is underway this afternoon in the coming hours, so let's keep a close eye on it. Thank you so much for your insight this morning, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you as well.